Hi, Faye. Thank you so much for coming on ADHD Her Way.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Wonderful. So we've had a bunch of problems, and it's just such a classic ADHD organization where from technological problems to crying children in the background, it was just everything, and luckily support helping in the background. But yes, it was just chaos from the beginning, and I love that for us.
Thankfully, we're such good creative problem solvers and we can think on the fly, so we managed to work it all out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what I'll start with is just a bit of an introduction so people will get to know you a little bit. So, this is Faye. She has been a heavy but high functioning drinker since her teens. Faye wound up in an inpatient detox in late 2017 after the wheels really fell off. Determined not to let her sobriety ruin her social life, she founded Untoxicated, now Australia's largest alcohol free social community. Wow. She's a TEDx speaker, a co-author, and has featured widely across media with a mission to normalize living with less or no alcohol in a culture that reverts it. With a lifelong fascination in human behavior, she holds a degree in psychology, is a certified grey area drinking coach, and is currently undertaking a master's of counselling. Faye is passionate about using her lived experience of intergenerational addiction to advocate for the reduction of stigma, to improve outcomes, and is a Smart Recovery Australia board member. Faye was also recently diagnosed with ADHD combined type at the ripe age of 48 and is now obviously hyper-focusing on creating awareness about the strong link between ADHD and addiction, studying to become an ADHD coach and trying to stop her leg from jiggling. I'm doing that just as we're talking underneath this table.
I've got my
Yeah, nice. Yes, no, I've got all my sensory little tools as well around me.
squidgy brain. Yeah.
Yeah, they're good, aren't they? Sensory
Yeah.
voice for the win. So, wow, what an amazing bio there, really bringing in that passion. Amazing. Tell us a little bit more before we get into the rest of the questions about what your journey has been like, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
I don't mind at all, Joanna. I think, really embrace the whole make your mess your message
Mm,
ethos. I think because, with things like both alcohol and ADHD, there's a lot of shame and stigma, which I think we are slowly shifting. But it leaves you sort of hiding lots of yourself for a long time. And basically, when I sort of came to realize that these things were, part of my makeup. I wouldn't say overcame ADHD because you don't overcome ADHD, but certainly
mm,
with the alcohol stuff and then managing better with the ADHD, and I am an ADHD coach now, is to be open about it and to
mm-hmm.
own it. And rather than letting the story own me, which it had done for a long, long time. And I think there's real power in that. So now basically I just don't shut the hell up to anyone who'll listen about all the things to do with alcohol and
Yeah.
any substance misuse, really,
Mm-hmm.
or any addiction and ADHD, because it's such a strong
Mm,
part of my own story, and it's something that I see in my work people struggling with every day.
yeah.
This has been a hard fought path for me to get here to where I am today, i.e., still functioning in some way as an adult, and there's been a lot of adversity on that path, and so I'm proud about that. And I think when you talk about it, you give other people permission to be vulnerable, and I think
Mm.
also they can see that there's light at the end of the tunnel,
Yeah, no, it's
possibly.
an
But
amazing story.
yeah,
It's very inspiring. I find it always very inspiring when people turn their own adversity and struggle into something that can inspire others and be a real great teaching moment. Yeah, definitely need more people like you in the world.
oh, thank
Now,
you.
I also have some questions about the link between ADHD and addiction. You've mentioned that there's such a shame attached to it, like society is very great at judging people with
Mm-hmm.
addiction problems, and also ADHD holds quite a negative stigma a lot of the time. Can you shine a bit more light on your understanding of the links between ADHD and addiction, and also maybe maintaining sobriety, where that comes in as well.
Yeah, I didn't really understand the links between ADHD and addiction at all until I did go into inpatient detox myself, stopped drinking, because that was, for me, was the main one that had become really problematic, and I'm happy to talk about that in as much detail as you would like. Sober, so I'm 6 years now without alcohol, and I just got this sense of everyone else that I know that is sober is talking about how calm they are and how it's really reduced their anxiety. And I just always felt like this relentless internal churning motor head that never stopped. And I think after the sort of initial euphoria of sobriety wore off, it was like, something's not right here.
Yeah.
Something's not right. But because I'd been to see a psychiatrist for a diagnosis or to just check it out some years before, and he basically, after half a session, said, go off and read The Untethered Soul, which is a book on basically mindfulness, really. It's a sort of spiritual book, because I've got a trauma history. And I was like, oh, well, I can't go. Look, it's obviously not ADHD. I'm just trying to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is why it's so hard for people to stay sober if they stop and they've got undiagnosed ADHD, whether doesn't matter what the addiction is, because living with it is difficult without it being treated. And so that was when I started looking into it again, and then finally got the diagnosis in 20. So then, of course, once I got the diagnosis, I started looking into all the links between ADHD and addiction, and I was just blown away. I was just absolutely blown away. Like, how come no one's ever mentioned this before? How come this is the first time I'm hearing about this? And in fact, the psychologist who diagnosed me, he said that he got into the profession because he worked in rehabs, and there were so many people with undiagnosed ADHD in there.
Yeah, not surprised.
Yeah, he was saying like 60, 70%, I think, from memory. And so that's why I really wanted to then create some awareness and create some noise about it, because I'm also seeing this in my own practice. So to take a little bit of a step back, what we see with ADHD is all of the things that are going to lead to misuse of whatever it is that's giving you dopamine. So we're impulsive, we're looking for immediate gratification, the emotional dysregulation is a huge part. We're looking for reward. We probably haven't learned ways to actually work with our nervous systems, which are set on high alert as it is. And we probably haven't found ways to be able to sort of wind down after the day. And I think also the other thing is that today's way of life, you're a busy working mum with 2 kids in the background, your husband's trying to get into bed. Like, it's too much for us, quite honestly.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we're in a constant state of overwhelm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think also the internal narrative that we hold about failure, shame, why can't I? Why is everyone else making this look easy? We've internalized that, and we believe that about ourselves. The research shows we've got low self-esteem and we're more prone to risk-taking. So it's all of the things in a big old melting pot of woohoo substances, woohoo food, woohoo gambling, whatever the addiction is, shopping, because it's taking us away from living with the symptoms, however they present for us, for a hot minute.
Yeah, the internal and external struggle, really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's just maybe turning it down a notch. And then, of course, we get the reinforcement, the impact on the brain, which is going, hey, now we want more of that.
Yeah.
We're going to think about tomorrow another time. We'll deal with this later. We just need something now.
Yes, we need that quick fix to make this sadness, make this distress, make this overwhelm go away.
Yeah, make this, why am I like this? Why is everyone else making this look easy? You know, this is what I hear with my clients all the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like that, just complete lack of self-trust and self-confidence is so low that it's all or nothing. Well, once I've done it, once I've reached for that one drink, drug, everything goes out the window.
And we don't have a very finely tuned off switch.
Yeah, such good points that you made. So, how do you think an ADHD diagnosis impacts someone with alcohol struggles specifically? I know that's something you really focus on. You touched on it a bit already. And what do you think, how does it alter the way that you approach treatment with someone that really struggles in that space?
I think that it alters it massively because we tend to view as a society addiction of any kind as a personal failing. It's a moral, there's a lot of morality laid at the feet of addiction rather than as a health issue or criminality, rather than as a, well, certainly in the case of alcohol, mass indoctrination. But I think when the ADHD diagnosis happens for people, it helps them feel less to blame in a way. That was certainly part of my own experience, was like, oh, no wonder. Like, this makes sense. Well, this is proper self-medication. Like, this is full self-medication. This is what this is. And
Yes, those
actually,
labels can help.
I may not have been able to withstand being a single parent in a country with no support, with two undiagnosed neurodivergent kids working full time. And when I look back, all of the things that
Yes.
hard to deal with. And so you can see now, okay, this makes a lot more sense. But I think also when you start looking back over your family history as well, it allows you to be more understanding, I think, of this is why other people struggle too. Or this is a significant part of why other people struggled. And I find that much more palatable than other interpretations, shall we say? It's more helpful to view through that lens for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to bring compassion, I think, both self-compassion, passion to parents who may have genetically too been more exposed to those risk factors, and also environmentally maybe not have provided a very enriched environment, further, I guess, posing the risk to you as well. Or I'm not suggesting your parents were, sorry, I meant more in the sense of like I can see those patterns playing out in across family generations.
Spot on. That's exactly it. And this is where, you know, a lot of the adverse childhood experiences and complex PTSD, you know, when I see that in myself and when I see that in clients, it's like, that's the end result of chaotic and dysfunctional parenting, which at the end of the day is undiagnosed neurodivergence a lot of the time, or not attuned at all to the child. There's not a lot of responsiveness there. There's sort of
more emotional deprivation.
Emotional deprivation. That's my predominant schema, I think, is emotional deprivation.
Absolutely, which are amongst neurodivergence, but other like mental health disorders as well. It's a very common one, and those generations, I think that the older generations before us had their own survival mechanisms, and then perhaps dealing with your emotions is one of the last things you want to do when you're in survival mode. So I think it's still, we're wearing the effects of it now, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the epigenetics as well. So the going through generation after generation is literally imprinting on your genes and your brain about what's happened 2 to 3 generations before. So given that was, say, World War II, it's unsurprising that lots of us are carrying this stuff. And I think that's the thing that you really start realizing is like everyone, and this line used to really grind my gears, but everyone's doing the best they can with what they've got.
Yeah, they, I guess, have backgrounds that perhaps didn't set them up well, but also maybe biologically they had kind of signs that they were always going to be struggle. In terms of
Absolutely.
in terms of your kind of take on, for instance, the culture of drinking and that in Australia specifically, or any social anxieties that people may experience, or even rejection sensitive dysphoria, what do you think are some of the key things that you two see or you have seen in the research affecting addiction and alcohol use disorder or alcohol problems? Could you touch on that for me as well?
Yeah, sure. So, in terms of the comorbidity or dual diagnosis, there's a strong link with anxiety. And of the research that I've seen, the most pervasive of those is the social anxiety. When I used to do a lot of events with Untoxicated, that's one thing that I noticed was, or a lot of people that used to come would be very socially anxious. And that's also been part of my story also. So that's another element. I mean, as we know, people with ADHD, 70 to 80% have another diagnosable mental health condition. So you're dealing with not just the ADHD, but often anxiety, trauma, any of the other smorgasbord of borderline BPD. So this is where it gets tricky, because people are going, I don't fit in, I'm on the outer, I don't quite understand the social rules necessarily, and so alcohol takes the edge off, or drugs, or whatever the thing is, takes the edge off when I want to, because I want to have friends, I want to be around people, I want to be social, but I can't do that without having a couple of drinks or a line or whatever it might be, or a spliff before I go to the thing. Or if I try and do it, it's so confronting and dysregulating to my nervous system that I need that to then bring myself down a notch.
Yeah, I hear that quite a lot in even the clients that are like, even though I don't work in the space all that often, it's maybe sometimes part of people's past. The parents that I see, they typically had a history of problematic drinking, binge drinking, and things like that. And I can often tie it back to, okay, so there was that taking place. Maybe it was even binge eating as well. Like there was other kind of binging behaviors. And then very quickly do the red, yellow flags go off for me. I'm like, maybe it is worth screening for something like ADHD or other neurodivergence as well. I see the comorbidity quite a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure you absolutely would. The food's another big one. I definitely see that a lot hand in hand with the alcohol.
Yeah, I just had a good interview. I'm about to release that episode as well on eating disorders, and it's just so interesting, hearing all the different comorbidities and just how each individual professional works with it. It's very similar approach by the sound, a very compassionate, very normalizing approach in terms of making the person not feel ashamed.
Yeah.
How else? What are the other ways that you typically work with the person or the people that you see and coach? What do you find are the strategies that are most useful, or that you typically would use in even the resources you share and things like that?
Accountability is a big one. I think, especially with ADHD, just knowing that someone's available and someone's going to ask next time, I think that's really motivating for us, even outside of this realm, just in things like body doubling. I don't do any sort of cookie cutter approach. I basically try to understand the individual, and I look at their life across the entirety. Like, what's going on for you? What need is the alcohol meeting? It's meeting a need of some kind.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. And so we have to find other ways to meet that need. But I'll also often try and scratch the surface around the beliefs that are held, that usually come from within the family quite often, which might be around things like, we don't trust people that don't drink, or people who don't drink are boring, or it's unsociable, it's rude. The only people that don't drink are those people that have a problem. And to be clear, not everybody who comes to me does have a quote unquote problem. Some people are just reining it in before it gets to any rock bottom. A lot of the people who come to see me are not rock bottom drinkers. They're not the severe AUD. And so, where was I? I was blathering on about something and I've just lost the train of thought. Oh, what tools I use. Yeah, so the beliefs, the payoff, what it's giving, we use depending on what they're presenting with. We've got to give a carrot as well. You've got to give motivation around what you're moving towards.
Yeah.
So we might look at values. Yeah. We might look at values. We might look at, the future you. We want to have a look at a really firm why they want to do this. Things like the stages of change model, I might step them through that and have a look at what might be holding them back. Because often people will say they want to make the changes, and actually when you start having a little bit of a look at it, they don't always necessarily want to.
Yeah, that's a big secondary gain.
That's okay.
Yeah.
We'll work with where you're at. So it's but other times what you might find when you scratch beneath the surface is it's problems in their relationships, or it's problems at work, or other stuff. So this is where I don't really have like a formula, because what will invariably happen, especially if I'm working with someone closely, is then all this other stuff comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you did such a nice job at just describing, especially meeting the person where they're at. I know that was exactly the same words that Kia used around eating disorders too, that similarly in another type of addiction, it's no use trying to say this is what you should be doing, or like this is the expectations, because that pressure is, if anything, really demotivating. And that person may not be ready to hear those things. Like you said, they may not be ready to let go of that really habit that they've held so closely to them, that crutch that they've used for many, like decades long, right? So it's important that you walk alongside them and show them different ways that they start to have confidence in themselves, that they no longer need to use those tools that are maybe not so adaptive.
It's not up to me. It's not my life.
That's right.
It's not up to me to dictate. So my journey was that I first went for alcohol counselling and was put on naltrexone, which is a medication that can help reduce the impact of the alcohol, and thus you drink less is the way that works. And I didn't stop drinking until 2017.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's the reality. So, and the research bears this out. So the harder we make it for people to access support, whatever that looks like for them, whether it's smart recovery online meetings, whether it's going onto a Facebook group with other people, whatever it is, coming to me, go and see this psychologist, go see an alcohol counsellor, the quicker we are supporting them through those stages of change, even if they're not at the point of readiness yet. They're building the foundations as they go, and that might not come to fruition until sometime later.
Yeah. And I just have them feel seen a lot of the time and validated. I think that's what most people want, right?
And they've been holding it. They've been holding this shameful secret for so long.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. When all they kind of, want to have someone that perhaps acknowledge that life isn't so easy. That's not like necessarily just a choice that they're making, that day in, day out, they're just making the poorest of choices. It comes down to perhaps really dealing with a proper addiction that is caused or comorbid with another proper condition. What are some common misconceptions about ADHD in the context of alcohol and addiction more generally, and how do you address them?
I think that when ADHD is dismissed as, everyone's got ADHD now, and, there is the whole ADHD is a superpower, and I certainly don't want to diminish any of the strengths of ADHD, but it's hard. It is hard. It is hard. And so the misconceptions are around this is just some sort of fluffy disorder that people are, just yay, this is the new fad because everyone wants to get the medication. Pretty sure there's a reason why the people I know who are in recovery, virtually all of whom have been diagnosed with ADHD, whether it's drugs or alcohol, are trying their absolute hardest to stay off. And going on to ADHD medication was absolutely not part of the plan, and they've often maintained sobriety for a long, long time. So this fallacy about, is addicts or people who just want to get access to the medication because ADHD is just this thing where you forget stuff half the time is really ignoring how debilitating it can be.
Absolutely.
Number one, which leads to the addiction, but also is insulting, quite honestly. But also there's this perception that people have to be at rock bottom when it comes to alcohol, and the only people that have problems are the ones on park benches and the ones that go to AA, and that is just absolutely not true.
No, that's right.
They're the people who are lawyers, they're the mental health professionals, they are all walks of life.
Yeah.
They're executives, they're high flyers, not all of them, but there's lots of people who are high functioning and behind the scenes their life is going to shit. Or they're managing quite okay, but they know that this isn't who they want to be because they don't want to keep waking up the next day and not remembering what they did. They don't want to be worried before they go to an event about what they might say or do. They don't want to be disengaged from their kids and not present for their children because they're worried about the impact on their kids. All of these sorts of things. So this misconception that people that have a problem with alcohol are the ones, the down and outs, couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah. No, thank you for shining light on that. And just on that point as well, around the impact on families that you mentioned, what would your recommendation be for the partner of perhaps the ADHDer who also has alcohol or other addictions? What would you say is a way that they can support the partner in this instance?
Help support them to get a diagnosis if they don't already have one.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the lines of communication open because this person is probably already feeling a huge amount of shame and guilt about their alcohol use, even if they are not the quote unquote rock bottom drinker. Offer to support them, but also it's not your battle. Look after yourself too, because what can happen is that loved ones will really try to support the person who's got any kind of addiction and they get the life sucked out of them, basically.
Yeah.
So know that while you can be there supporting to the best of your ability, you can't do it for them. Nobody can. And you have to look after yourself as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Do you work yourself with couples at all, or do you typically see only the individual, and it's possible that sometimes the partner attends?
Generally only the individual, but obviously I've been the one who was the big drinker and that caused problems in relationships. And had that person said anything to me or made a big deal out of it, I would have and did flip my lid about it because I would go in and out of denial, which is quite common. So this is why the partner has to look after themselves as well, because sometimes the person is not willing or able to get help.
Yeah, it's really hard to be that loved one and see the person really struggling, and that there is a way that they may get the help that they need, but then them getting pushed away constantly. I can hear that quite often, unfortunately.
Yeah, and particularly as women, I think we want to help, and I'm not saying that men don't, but
be the rescuer.
we rescue, and then before we know it, this is now our world. We're immersed in it. If only we can make them see.
Yeah.
And we can't. We can't.
Yeah.
It's a really tricky line. I'm not for 1 minute saying pull up stops and get the hell out of there. Like there's a period where you're trying to, but there does come a point where you have to detach from taking this on as your issue.
Yeah. Exactly. Unless it's a domestic violence relationship also,
Oh,
then, there's 1800 respect. There's other like phone lines to get that support in order to know maybe the next steps for yourself as well and to keep your family safe.
yes, thank you. I didn't even think of mentioning that because that's not generally something that I tend to see. But that,
Yeah.
yes, 100%.
Yeah.
The arguing is definitely something that is quite central to a lot of people's stories when they drink with their partners. Because often birds of a feather flock together. So often you will find that people get together with partners who are quite similar to them in that regard in terms of their drinking.
Yeah.
And interestingly, often you will find that the ones that don't drink had an alcoholic parent and they've
Mm-hmm.
gone and got together with a partner now who struggles with
Yes.
alcohol.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so very true. And getting
Mm.
into that drama triangle almost all over
Mm-hmm.
again, being that parentified child,
Yeah.
usually being the rescuer, and then they're going through that cycle of being with a persecutor or someone who victimizes themselves. And yeah, see it unfortunately very often. This,
We repeat the patterns
yeah, yeah,
over and over and over again until we become aware, and even then it's hard to break them.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess with the right support, whether it's resources, books, online platforms, like you said, support groups, they're incredibly helpful. Do you have any
Mm.
specific ones on the top of your mind, specifically for the person with, for instance, ADHD and addiction? Is there any at top of mind for you that you want to share?
Not really. What you'll find though is if you go into those groups, there'll be a hell of a lot of people with ADHD. I kid you not, because I started out just doing the grey area drinking coaching, and then when I got my diagnosis, I was like, right, this is I've got
Mm-hmm.
to do something here. So I did the study with ADCA in the States to become an ADHD coach, and yeah, it's in what I see with my clients, even before I started doing the ADHD coaching, was they were coming back to me 6 months later going, oh, guess what? I've just had a diagnosis. After I got diagnosed, virtually all of my friends and all the people I know in recovery, the majority have been diagnosed. In my mind,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
43% of people with ADHD have an alcohol use disorder.
Yeah, wow.
And then that's just alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't account for drugs. That doesn't account for, illicit drugs and pharmaceutical.
Yes, pharmaceuticals not a big one.
Then you've got sugar, which I know some people would say, oh, don't be ridiculous, but it's a thing. I've had a client who absolutely was addicted. She was autistic and ADHD.
Yeah.
She was addicted to sugar.
Mm. I
We
was
worked
taken
together
off
for a
sugar
couple of
as a
months.
child, actually. Like they thought that maybe
Ah,
it was a problem with sugar back in the day. And that was like a thing, yeah, where they tried that back in the 90s. Good old days where ADHD in girls just wasn't a thing back then, really.
when did you get diagnosed, Joanna?
It was only last year, yeah, the beginning of last year, more formally. So very recent. And it was always there were signs of it as a child, even. So I just kind of laugh at it now. But I mean, it wasn't easy by any means. I was able to internalize a lot of it, I suppose, like, or mask it, I should say. But it came out in that perfectionistic young girl who was just a people's pleaser and teacher's pet, the typical presentation as a young girl.
This is the typical client that I see
Mm-hmm.
are the perfectionists and the high performers, and
Yeah.
they've tended to do quite well, and
Gone
then the
under the
wheels fall
radar.
off, gone under
Yeah.
the radar, and then they burn out,
Mm-hmm.
or they hit perimenopause, or something that they have kids, which as we know is another big, and they're like, what is happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I see that side of thing in the perinatal period a lot. Now, are there any, actually, I wanted to ask you about the grey area coaching that you're doing. Tell me a bit more about what that is, because I haven't actually heard that before.
Yeah, so the grey area drinking phrase was really, or terminology was really brought to Light by Jolene Park, who did a TED Talk. She's a functional practitioner and she very much takes a holistic approach. And so she did that TED Talk and it went gangbusters. And so she's who I trained under. So the grey area is basically where a lot of people are. And that is the space between and every now and then drinker, someone who can take it or leave it, like I do with gambling, for example. Like I probably gamble once a year, don't even think about it. That level of drinking, not bothered, occasionally I will. To someone who probably has tried to take breaks. They're not necessarily excessive with their drinking. It might be a bottle, it might be half a bottle, it might be binges, but they're not someone that other people around them would necessarily identify and go, oh, that person's really got an issue with alcohol.
Yeah.
And this is where a lot of people sit. But behind the scenes, they are spending a lot of time thinking about their drinking, how to moderate, how to change it up so that they don't keep overdoing it, having breaks to prove that they can, but somehow they always end up back in the same cycle. And there's a lot of shame there as well. They feel shame and regret.
Yeah.
And generally, a good rule of thumb is people who don't have a problem with drinking don't even think about whether they're drinking too much, in the same way that I never think about whether I gamble too much.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
I never think about whether I smoke too much. You know, there's a reason you're thinking about it, whoever might be hearing this.
Yeah, that's so true. It's usually at the front of mind, and if you're perhaps trying heavily not to think about it, you may be quite in denial about how big the problem actually is.
And just get curious. Just get curious. It doesn't mean that you've got an insurmountable problem. It might be that you are able to moderate. It might be that you can make some changes and make them stick. But then if you keep getting the evidence over time that that's not an option, well, then that's when it's worth maybe taking a little bit of a further look at that. And I think also the other good sort of barometer, rather than the however many drinks you're drinking or any of those other things, or where do I fall on the alcohol use disorder spectrum, is to say, am I being in the world as the person I want to be?
Yeah.
Am I the parent I want to be? Am I the partner? Am I the friend? Am I the me I want to be?
Yeah.
To myself.
Yeah.
Is alcohol in taking more than it's giving?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Is it letting me live alongside my values?
Yeah.
Actually, if socializing is the value and you feel as though it takes the edge off and allows you to socialize more, you've maybe found this crutch, and it is hard then to go, well, if I take that away, then I'm not going to be as social. People are not going to like me as much. I'm not going to be as funny.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the one that has the answer to these things is the individual, but we don't always want it to be the answer.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's complex.
Yeah.
So it's about trying to ask yourself those questions with a sense of curiosity and without judgment if you can.
That's so true. Yeah. And then the next thing is being present in the activities, living the life that you want to lead.
Correct. Yeah. And look, it's sometimes when you do a cost benefit, it might be, okay, there's a few downsides, but I'm willing to pay the price because, to me, if I have that chocolate bar, I'm going to feel a bit worse, or I'm going to, so we're all constantly making these decisions about the payoff and the benefit.
Similarly, so like, having a drink, putting a huge amount of pressure on yourself. I must not drink this, and the more you think about not drinking, and like that,
it's the elephant in the room. You didn't see the blue car when you tried not to see blue cars, because the more shame we feel as well, the more likely we are to return to the thing that we're trying to move away from, because it makes us feel better.
Yes.
So that's why this isn't.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just a be kind to yourself thing. This is like, if you actually want to give yourself the best chance to change the behaviour, actually this is a necessary part of the process.
Yeah, you need to break the cycle with compassion and things like that. Yeah, curiosity,
to be kinder to yourself. And what I've also found with ADHDers as well is you have to, if they've got any kind of demand avoidance, this is where you have to sort of a little bit. I had one client, the sugar client, actually, she sent some feedback. I always ask for feedback after they've been working with me. And she said, one of the things she said was, she sent me so many resources. It was great with no pressure to do any of them.
I love that.
I was like, brilliant, because she recognised she had PDA.
Yeah.
And she told me that at the beginning, and I was like, okay.
Absolutely.
Well, then this isn't going to work if I say, I want you to.
Mm-hmm.
So when we've got that internalized PDA as well, or demand avoidance of any kind, even if we're the ones setting the rule, there's going to come a point where we try and rebel against it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Such great points. Now, I usually finish the conversation with a little bit of would you rather. So I tend to make these up on the spot because I have learned that we're on episode like the third and fourth interview I've done, and yet I'm kind of to become prepared with these questions hilariously. Typical ADHD. Would you rather be stuck in a room full of barking dogs, or would you rather be stuck in a room with screaming cats instead?
Oh, can I pick neither? I love cats.
Being a cat lover, you are.
I love cats and I love dogs too, but I've got my issues around noise.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a Bengal, and when she gets her moan on, they're very vocal. It's a very vocal breed.
Yes. And
it does my head in, and it brings back memories of when the kids were little, and I make it stop.
Yes, absolutely.
So if I had to pick, I think I'd probably pick cats, but I would say dogs are probably easier to keep happy than cats. Cats are cats are turds, and that's why I love them.
No, I agree. I would probably pick the dogs personally. I'm more of a dog person. I have had cats, and I do love some cats because a lot of them can be a-holes, but
they're hit and miss. Yeah,
they are definitely hit
they
and
can.
Miss.
That's why I like them, because they're just like, they don't give a shit. They're like, I don't care.
That's right. And it can be a bit controversial whether you're a cat or a dog lover. But yes, the noise that they make for an ADHD or autistics can be pretty intolerable.
Any
Thank
noise.
You so much.
Oh, yeah. My pleasure. My pleasure. That was a fun one.
I know. I enjoy finishing on that note. Just lighten it a little bit at the end. I know it was very serious topics today. Now, in terms of some actual resources, in terms of where people can find you, do you have any resources on your website that you want to share? Plug all your stuff if you can, Faye.
Yeah, if people are interested in finding out any more about what I do, they can go to Faye with an E, Lawrence with a W.com.au. That's my website. I've got heaps of blogs and information on there, and also on my Instagram I make very lame attempts to do reels.
They're not lame, they're great.
My real game is rubbish. I have PDA against Mark Zuckerberg, so this is why I'm not playing this game, but I know that I have to. So yeah. So, but you can hop onto my Instagram and have a look as well.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, so I'll also make sure to plug that stuff. Thank you so much for coming and having such a vulnerable conversation and sharing your insights.
Thanks for having me on.
Very valuable.
Thank you.
And
thanks.
Look forward to chatting again in the future. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening, Faye.
Thanks, Johanna. I appreciate that. See ya.
Bye. Bye-bye.